IVM.
Cloud-based solutions have witnessed an unprecedented demand in the new normal. As enterprises across industries look to build a future-ready infrastructure and enhance agility, they have increasingly realized that the answer lies in the cloud. The world's cloud runs on Intel, with over 50,000 instance types available globally on Intel Xeon Scalable processors from leading cloud service providers. They deliver a broad choice of performance, availability, and scalability for your workloads. Intel's broad footprint offers you an easy migration path, so you can pivot for the applications, cost, cloud provider, and data governance needs that are most critical to your business. To know more about how clouds provided by Intel Technologies deliver reliable, scalable, workload-optimized performances across enterprise applications, visit intel.in. Shunya One is brought to you by Intel. Performance made flexible. That's how wonderful gets done.
Hey everyone, welcome to Shunya One, episode 160. Amit, how you doing?
I'm doing good. This is a different one, isn't it?
This is a very different, very interesting new conversation. And I'm glad we did it because I think we meet a lot of people, like we were saying earlier, from obviously the startup world, the ecosystem around it, like VCs and operators and founders and whatnot. But we haven't spoken to too many, let's say, ecosystem enablers, and that to folks like this who are hardcore government foundations, where it's actually an foundation, meaning they're just trying to promote digital governance, which is great.
What I find really interesting, right, is that governance is probably one of the areas more people in India probably interact with government services than they do with any kind of private service.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Just given the levels of like poverty and what have you, right? This is very much something that's been there. And if anybody who is really kind of transforming those services in a significant and meaningful way, I think that really is helpful. And I think that's a great mission for these guys to have.
No. And thankfully, we have Viraj Tyagi, the CEO of eGov Foundation, talking to us today. He's going to talk to us about, all the various things they've built and the, government OS, as I think you called it, that they have actually built. So let's take a break and jump right in. Hey Amit, really appreciate you pointing out those Intel case studies. There's some truly incredible stuff going on there.
Yeah, what'd you come across?
Well, it's a rabbit hole. So, remember we were talking about water utilities last week. Mm-hmm. And, while I'm an engineer, although mostly electrical and computers, I've always been fascinated about pretty much everything else. So stuff like how fluids worked. So anyway, I looked a lot more into that. I came across this incredible project Intel worked on with Google and NASA.
Wow, really? What impressed you so much about it?
Well, it's how they use the cloud and AI together to solve a really tough problem, as always, right? So one of the challenges with, let's say, predictive models is getting your data set correct. So a lot of data we have is really, really old, like written down in notebooks old. What Intel, Google, and NASA did is first, they set up this instance on GCP with around 960 gigabytes of RAM.
960, not 64, not 96, 960.
Yes. And dude, that's not even the most impressive part. The way they use this, to set up a system that can predict what kind of conditions lead to floods in the most vulnerable areas. That's what's impressive.
Yeah, I definitely do need to check this out. It's on the Intel site?
Yes. You can go to intel.in, read up on this, and of course, a bunch of other case studies. Hey, Viraj, welcome to the show. Welcome to Shunya One. Thank you so much for being here.
Very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think it's your first podcast, if I'm not wrong.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. My first
wow.
Wired headphones also.
Lovely. So it's going to be interesting, I hope. And of course, I would love to, get into the kind of work that you do. And of course, a little bit of your personal background so that, everyone listening in today can understand how eGov sort of came to be.
So I think, let me just get into two parts. My personal background is, I'm very new to the sector. I'm only 5 years into the social impact sector. Before that, did a bunch of things. Was a banker for about 10 years in UK and Europe, and came back to India in 2004. Worked for a bank for a while here, Standard Chartered Bank. And then the startup kind of bug hit me. In 2007, I started with another colleague of mine, Nitin Gupta, an organization called Net Positive, which was one of the first big data analytics setup in India at that time.
Mhm.
And we did some bunch of crazy stuff. We worked in 14 countries, Middle East and Asia, mainly financial services, retail financial services. We did both products and analytical services. And 2012, one of our customers, Equifax, which is a large credit bureau, approached us saying we're interested in uh, taking a stake in your organization. And Lisa and I looked at each other and say, yeah, why not? I think let's give it a shot. So I think, long story short, 2015, we exited net positive, solely to Equifax. And I have always had this throbbing vein or a kida in my head to do something about what's happening around us. So I think when I came out, I for a while worked with Delhi government for about 6 months. I was head of a task force for clean Yamuna and water and sanitation. And that was a very interesting experience for me to work in government. And I was pretty went with a lot of trepidation whether I can add value. But I was quite pleasantly surprised the problem solving skills and connections and entrepreneurial energy you bring into a situation, how it can move things forward. 6 months later, I kind of went and met Nandan and said, "This is I want to do something at scale with government, which kind of improves how things are around us." And he kind of said, eGov Foundation is something he started in 2003. And he said he felt it's an important problem to solve. India is urbanizing. Urbanization is the real force behind what our future is going to be economically, socially, and all those things. But our focus on delivering services in the urban areas, having the right governance in urban areas is not really that high. And that was the mandate of eGov Foundation. And he felt it can scale up much more. And that led to a series of conversations. And I really liked the work which was happening there. I really like the mission that, we want to kind of transform governance and service delivery in India. And that's how I got here. And after that, it's been a crazy journey. I've never had so many challenges in my life. I thought I had seen it all, being a honcho in a bank and then ran a startup. But this is a different kettle of fish. So this has been an amazing journey after that.
Wow. And if you could, go into the, actual platform a little bit, because like you said, Nandan Nilekani started this a while ago, and then, it seems like it's a bundle of services for various stratas of the government layers. I don't know if how you would call it, but what is it today? And what have you seen this sort of transformation, like you said, since you joined? What have you seen it become?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very interesting thing. Well, a lot of us who come from corporate background, we are so used to having target segments that you say, I'm going to launch a new bank, and it's going to be 30-year, or millennials and stuff like that. You can actually carve out things around that. When you work on societal problems, I think one of the first things I learned was there is no one target segment. You need to service the citizens all hues and stratas. From somebody who lives in a slum who doesn't actually use the mobile phone, right? But they also need services. Two people, who are kind of live in West Coast in that sense, right, in India. And then there are government employees who are, in a lot of ways still stuck in the 18th century system of files and paperwork. And when the whole world has moved to, using different kind of tools to make their work less, less of a drudgery. Then there are bureaucrats, who need information and accountability and all those things. And the policymakers. So I think one of the first things that we realized was we cannot be servicing only one of these. If you look at different parts of the societal system, the what we call Samaj Sarkar Bazaar, the communities, the markets, and the government, there are multiple stakeholders. And this was one of the reasons why we had not scaled, because we kind of thought of ourselves as somebody who services the government. So almost like a tech vendor, albeit as a foundation to the government, and that kind of makes you take certain decisions, certain approaches. You're always solving for what somebody wants. So when we started thinking in 2015, 16 about if we really want to make a big impact at a society at a national level, right? What should it look like? And I think where we kind of net it out is unless we really unshackle or unblock various actors by having an approach which we broadly call platform approach, which is building open platforms which are multi-sided in that sense, right? And really taking away some of the capability constraints the system has. So that's the other thing, when we work in corporate sector, the capabilities are very well understood. You go and pitch to a bank, I want to give you a core banking system. You pretty much know the language you're talking, and you say, "Acha, you need to do these 25 things." They will find a way of doing it, or they'll tell you what they need. Of course, there are pushes and pulls. I think when you work in this sector, the capabilities are not a given in that sense. I think government is very good at scaling. Government is very good at deploying stuff, but government is not good at really understanding technology and how it works. Okay, so I think you need to actually solve for those capability constraints rather than saying, "What if those capabilities were there?" So I think so. In a way, you're kind of solving for the capacity challenges that each of the actors have or the constraints they work with. So where we netted out was we kind of said, rather than being a vendor and building custom solutions for various governments, what if we said we create an open platform? We call it Digit, which is digital infra for governance, impact, and transformation, and really build it on the latest stack, which is what Facebook, Netflix, and all these dudes use, and which is nationally scalable. But don't get into the business of implementation. Actually build an ecosystem around it, which implements it and deploys it and builds new solutions on top of it. But equally work on the policy side with the government and say, this is another way of solving, rather than doing RFP for every time, saying, please build a property tax system for me, or please build a system to handle grievances, and build a point solution, right? You actually have a platform on which you can build multiple solutions. Right? So that was a big bet we kind of made, 5.5 years ago. And we basically, in some ways, we had a lot of knowledge we had built over, 13 years, but we actually built it completely new. So it was a very tough decision to say what we had built, which has worked, I think, pretty well. It's not that it hasn't worked. Chennai has been running for the last 11 years. It works very well. But I think it didn't meet our ambition of being a national.
So if I understood correctly, what you're looking at is essentially you're creating for lack of a better term, like a government OS, and you're asking people to build solutions on top of that, right?
Yes. Only difference being you need to create some imagination. So we did build some reference solutions on top of it, which basically like starter pack. You can start off with that.
Can you give us some examples around that? Like, so first examples in terms of like, what are the kind of solutions you build on top, and what is the underlying tech that exists to facilitate those solutions?
Yeah.
I guess that might be a really broad question, but I think a little context would be helpful to people listening.
So I think the solutions are, for example, if you're a citizen, there are 3 or 4 things you need from a services point of view. You need to kind of apply for various things, from applying for a trade license, you're opening a new shop, or you apply for a new water connection, new sewerage connection. You say you want to build a extension to your house, building plan approval. So there are a lot of applications we have, which kind of, or you need a fire, no objection certificate, all those kind of things. So that's one. Second is you need to complain. You need to say, yes, there's garbage outside my door, right? Not just complain, but you need to track it, what's happened to it, and all those kind of things. And then you're saying you need information about what's happening in your locality. Where are the various functionaries who can help you? And finally, you need to pay your taxes, municipal taxes, and all those things. So those are property tax payment, water bill payment, your payment of your charges, various kind of charges. So those are kind of solutions. So those are kind of solutions that we've built. About 12, 13 of those, right? Mm-hmm. But then there are solutions for the service delivery people, right? We have like inboxes, you have workflow, you have approval processes, you have alerts, you have dashboards to see what's happening in various kind of areas, real-time dashboards and all that. So that's and the way it is different is, I think one thing I forgot to mention was the reason why when we say I want to get something done with the government is, and people kind of say, boss, this is, I'd rather not. I'll pay a town and say, boss, please, I can't be dealing with it. There's a basic, trust deficit. You go
transparency,
there.
Lack of transparency.
Yeah. And trust, you say, boss, this is hard. Why would I go? I go to the municipality office, they'll send you 3 different windows. When I go there, there's no transparency. Many application, I've given the application. What has happened to it? Right? I think a lot of times, actually, very interesting, actually, when we did research, we found that people are not that worried about that things take time. They expect the government takes time. But what they're worried about is what is happening. Can you tell me,
If
has it
it's
been
moving ahead.
processed? Yes.
Yeah.
Is it moving ahead? If it's stuck, where is it stuck? Right. So I think it's a bit like, when we used to take taxis 15 years ago, it was a broken process. So you call that guy in the night, you'll come tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock, I've got a flight. And you call two guys because you know one of them is not going to turn up. Right. Then you don't know how much he's going to charge you. And there's no update what's happening, which driver is going to come, what kind of car is going to come. You get in the car, right? If the car is smelly or whatever. So I think every point of touch point, there is a stress which leads to this kind of thing, boss, it's not worth me. And that's why you say, boss, I'd rather call my driver at 4 o'clock in the morning. But what Ola, Uber, and all those people have done is actually using the digital signals from the whole value chain, right? At each stage, you know what's happening. So that's the real power of platforms, open platforms in the context of public services. That I raise a complaint, straight away I get a number. Thank you for complaining. This is your number. It's been assigned to so and so person. It's a ticket, yeah. Then somebody says, okay, or there's an update. The person is coming today to fix this, right? When it is done, you say, okay, please rate it, right? It's very interesting. One of the IS officers said, it is amazing that earlier the citizens used to chase the municipal employees. But today the municipal employees chase the citizens so that they get the ratings. Please rate me, right? So I think that is a very big difference that you see when you start using technology to create trust in the system. Right? So, and the amazing thing is, in Andhra Pradesh, where we started working 6 years ago, they used to get 20,000 complaints a year. Once we put this system in place, they get more than 150,000 complaints a year. Not because there are more complaints, but because people have trust that this will work.
Yeah, to actually submit it.
Absolutely.
They used to avoid submitting it before.
Absolutely. They'll say, what's the point? I mean, that's what people say. What's the point? Typically, why should I do it?
No, that's really interesting, right? I mean, like, one of the really interesting things I find in this, right, is this idea that you're getting trust through the idea of basically making people open to reviews, right? Which is what you saw on Uber or Ola, or I mean, like, Airbnb for that matter is the same kind of thing where trust has kind of come to it because there are so many people reviewing it. Zomato, all of these food aggregation or other restaurant listing apps, same kind of thing. I find it really fascinating that the same kinds of concepts are being used towards to improving facility of government capability, especially in context of what you mentioned earlier, right? Like there are capability constraints. So this is a way to kind of drive those actions. Seems like a really interesting choice you all made.
And it's also a lot of times, and this is one of the biggest learning I have working with the government is we assign intent where there's capability issue, right? So a typical reaction in our middle class, this thing was Sarkar is by design, they don't want to do, and when I say Sarkar, I'm saying people who deliver services. We are municipal. They're people at the end of it, right? They're people who want to do, most of them, any sector, 80% of people want to do a good job and go home and, sleep peacefully, right? 10% are exceptional, 10% are crooks everywhere. You can go to private sector. But I think what my realization was, you would think a district commissioner or a principal secretary is very powerful, right? But they operate with much more constraints than a chief technology officer or a head of sales in a private sector, because they are bound by rules and they're bound by what access they have to capacities and capabilities around them. So it's very interesting actually working with government.
And in all of this, what you guys were doing as a mandate was it just digitizing, or was it also improving processes? Or what was the length of, let's say, the capability you were given as a foundation, right? Because I believe this is also another thing about, since you mentioned earlier, most people don't or avoid working with a government as even a vendor, right? Because they feel it's too constraining. There's no open thinking. There's all of that. Like, I can speak from a tech vendor standpoint. It's always restrictive. So how much of that applied to you as a foundation?
No, I think you have to work on that. That's what I'm saying. Just doing technology alone is not going to cut it. You can make the sexiest technology in the world. It will not work unless you address policy. Because remember, government, the biggest lever for change is actually policy. I mean, in terms of when I say policy, what are the kind of things that you can do what are the kind of enablement or enabling policies you can create so that adoption happens, right? So I think one of the things we have been really working for last 5 to 6 years is working in the both at the central and state government and saying there is an alternate view of the world, right? Which is that you don't have to do RFP for every time you have to build application to deliver service, right? You can actually use an open platform, open source technology, and we will kind of underwrite the performance of the platform. But it's like an OEM or an OS for your service delivery, and then you are kind of your insurance or assurance of results is much higher. So we've worked very
So
hard.
how,
Sorry, go on.
just trying, how does that work, right? I mean, like when you say that you don't need to do RFP, how does the government go about, let's say state government X exists, which wants to go about, which wants to build a new service or wants to redo a service and like, but you guys are a possible implementation form. How would the mechanics of that work?
So I think first of all, we took ourselves out of any commercial engagement with governments because I remember
So
having.
how is your system, how is your platform implemented?
So
If
basically,
you all are not.
yeah. So what we've done is we've built an ecosystem of system integrators. So let's say Odisha. We met Odisha about almost two and a bit years ago, and we said they were running a certain system by a certain tech firm for last 10 years. Nothing was happening, and met the principal secretary. There's another way of doing it, right? That you do a RFP only for system integration or implementation. Okay, take the platform, and we took them through what platform does, what it doesn't do, which are the other states that have done it, how much, and we help them. How will the specs look of the platform and everything. And then our commitment was whichever partner you choose, we'll enable them. So whether in terms of how the platform works, how to consume the APIs, how to configure things, how to deploy it, all those things. So I think we have three roles in the ecosystem. Obviously, we are the main contributor to the open source platforms. Other people also contribute. We are a platform builder, a main contributor to the platform. Then the big other role we have is we are the ecosystem enabler, right? In a way, we are catalyzing a market, right? Over a OS, as you were saying earlier. And the third role is really working with policymakers to say how this particular construct can actually be adopted at scale across the nation. Does that answer your question?
I want to go a little deeper on that. Yeah, I actually want to go a little deeper on that, Viraj. But you know what? We're going to take a quick break and come back and get those answers.
$100. That's all it takes to begin your journey with Bitcoin and Ethereum. No, really. With CoinSwitch, you can start investing in over 100 cryptocurrencies with just 100 rupees. On top of that, there are zero charges for deposits and withdrawals, so you can trade, buy, sell, however and whenever you want. All of this, plus their extremely intuitive interface, makes CoinSwitch the perfect app for beginners in the crypto space. But don't take my word for it. Just download CoinSwitch for free and try it out for yourself. If you'd like more information on cryptocurrencies, tune into A Show About Crypto with me, Rohan Joshi, my new adventure on IBM Podcasts. CoinSwitch, kuch to badlega.
Hey, welcome back. Viraj, you were obviously sharing with us a whole bunch of details around the kind of things you as your organization does. And you actually mentioned that it's not just tech, it's also helping governments improve their process, helping governments choose partners to work with. Given that a lot of this is, though, of course, enabled by technology and technology which you guys have built or spec'd and, laid out the platform for, what are those building blocks? And if I were, let's say, a potential tech company or a startup or someone who feels that, maybe I can help the government with a better service for, let's say, a portal which I use today, right? I mean, I know there is something better that can be done here. I know we can use ABC technology. How do I go about it? And how do you, can you walk us through an example that you enabled?
So I think from a very simple architecture perspective, what we did was we said, you need to unbundle, the components, right? So I think the historical way of doing things is you just build monoliths. You're saying you need to solve a problem, of raising grievances in a particular city. You build a solution which has workflow kind of hard coded. It has databases, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the issue is what happens is the data gets locked, and it's very difficult to move forward when something changes. because and India is a complex country. Let's not forget, India is a subcontinent. I think it's a continent. number of states and number of various
the complexity of life here. Yes,
it's just crazy. Right? I think what applies to Bombay doesn't apply to Bhilwara, and so on and so forth. And the other thing is, we talk about urban India. Urban India is anywhere from a small city like Tenali in Andhra Pradesh, 20,000 people, to obviously Delhi, which is 2 crore people. Right? So it's complex both from a scale and the diversity perspective. Right? So coming back, what we did was we basically abstracted it to 3 kind of components. One is what we call a core data infra, which basically defines what is where. Okay. So it has a set of registries. There's a property registry, there's a water registry, there's an employee registry. So all the registries, which is basically what we call irreputable data, is kind of stored there. It also has specs. So I think we are big fans of specs. I think we really believe spec is one of the biggest things we can contribute so that other people can build stuff. We spec, how is the service built? What does the service compose of? We do taxonomies, ontologies, and stuff like that. Right? So that without us in the room, people can use it. Right? So I think we have the core data infra. It also has a small data exchange layer, so that different entities can exchange data and stuff like that. Then we have what we call core services, or which is things like payments. Every service needs a payment.
Right.
Things like
and you built this from scratch, or you also used like you said, bundles or third-party components or some stuff like that?
I think most of
because payments is actually, there's so much payments infra given by the government itself, like various other organizations of the government.
No, so we don't. Still, at the end of it, we'll still do UPI or all those things, right? But processing payments, raising a demand, making a collection. So we have collection service, demand service, payment service.
Got it.
So similarly, you have routing service. Similarly, you have assigning service. You need to assign it to somebody. So there are, I think, 25, 30 services like that. Basically, any service delivery kind of a function will need that. So they're abstracted. The same collection service can be used by electricity board, can be used by water board. And it's like Lego block, typical microservices. It's a microservice architecture, by the way. So you can combine them in multiple ways and say, okay, things like authentication, auditing, all those. So both on the infra side and the service side, those services are there. And the third, and all this is kind of through open APIs. So we have published APIs. If you go to digit.org.in, the published APIs of all of these, right? And then over that, we have reference application, which says, how do you combine, a payment services, auditing service with authentication services and property registry to actually create a demand for a property, which is self-assessment. Okay. How do you kind of create a workflow, which is, role-based, not people-based, all those kind of things. So that's the reference application layer, right? So, all the reference solutions. So those are the 3 key layers. So, and then all the applications have extension hooks. So somebody says, in my locality, actually, it's not a 2-step process, it's a 3-step process. Yeah, please go ahead. Right. Somebody says, I need to build a hospital appointment booking system. So there is a ticketing system. There's a ticketing services. There's a registry services. There is a alert service. Please combine them in these ways and you build it. So today, almost, I would say,
lovely.
Between we built some 12, 13 kind of reference applications. There are 30 plus or 40 plus applications built by various ecosystem actors.
So how many states are you all present in right now?
So right now, at various stages of implementation, there are about 14 states.
Okay.
Yeah. And only one of them, and only one of them we implemented, which was Punjab, which we call exemplar, to show people that actually you can do it in 90 days. You don't need to take 2 years to build a municipal ERP or municipal solution. Right? And you can do it in AWS. By the way, Punjab runs on AWS. So the first, and you can do it rather than spending 200 crore on RFP, you can do 8 crore rupees. And that's the kind of difference, automatically difference that you have in when you say faster, better, cheaper. It actually is faster, better, cheaper. It's pretty cool that way.
Wow. And, maybe depends on where you live and where the kind of access you have to these services as a citizen. We obviously have seen a lot come out from the government in all these years, right? I think India as a country has been on this digitization and convenience of government services path for a while. I mean, apart from the core stuff like Aadhaar and UPI, There's also a bunch of these, I think, DigiLocker apps that you use. And within that, you have all of these other government services who give things digitally. Are these pipes also sort of intertwined with the kind of work you do or the kind of systems you've built? I mean, I'm referencing only the ones which I have obviously interacted with, apart from the income tax website, which we all have, maybe. But what are the various, services which you can say stand out amongst the things that you have delivered, enabled delivery of?
I think I would say till now our focus has been the urban service delivery. We've recently, I'll give you a great example when how things can come together quickly to respond to a situation. Right? So when COVID, the first lockdown happened March last year. Right? We all saw the pictures of policemen were doing their duty mostly to kind of make sure people don't go out. People were trying to get to their work for essential services, and there were scenes of people being beaten up and stuff like that. And I think we saw it and we said maybe this is something we can respond to. Ultimately, e-pass is basically a permission to be in a certain place for a certain reason, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it needs to be. So we actually within 8 days for essential services workers using the components from Digit from our platform, we created a e-pass system, which was basically from the service provider can upload the names of people who need to be given e-passes. Then it goes through a process from the local authorities can then quotas in terms of how many people can be in the road on a particular day. And then it used to go through a kind of a QR code based pass will go to their employees with a SMS, which people can verify. And we had more than 8 states take it up in in 20 days. More than 10 lakh journeys happened. So this is
Nice.
I mean that was really the moment where I felt we can do much more than just urban. And now we've done yesterday we went live in Odisha again using Digit platform on the bottom to do sanitation services. All these small towns have fecal sludge. They have septic tanks, and you don't know where it goes, right? How frequently it is. So we have basically created a digital solution around that, the whole value chain of shit being picked up, where it is taken, how it is processed, and all. So I think, but ePass was a great example of responding to the situation that country was facing and how. And it was not just the technology, also because the way we operate, how the ecosystem worked with us. So we have from Unilever, PNG to volunteers from companies to AWS, all those people working with us to make it happen. Try was involved in that. So I think that's something that stands out in my mind, at least.
So that's actually interesting, right? You're talking about movement. So from primarily urban, when you go statewide, I'm guessing. So you mentioned city, state, and country, right? At some point in time, in terms of this, but rural is part, I guess, in some ways of state or country. This, but how is that, right? I mean, like how different is that? Because again, when you're doing one of the challenges I think I would see, right, is that there is a certain amount of population density in urban, which leads to a certain amount of tax base, which leads to a certain amount of ability to spend. And that ability to spend in rural on a per capita basis is probably not as high, right? Or sorry, because the capita is so lower, it's probably not as high on a cumulative basis. So are there going to be ecosystem partners who will service that primarily, or how do you see that playing out?
No, I think your point is absolutely valid. The service delivery is service delivery. It doesn't matter. There are only 4 or 5 things that need to be done. You need to. So I think, in fact, we just went live with something called Mgram Seva in Punjab last week. Which is essentially having the water bills from a gram panchayat, done through a very simple, interface that even a pump operator can use in the local language and all those things. So I think there is no reason why you cannot apply what we're doing in rural. It's just that I think it's not. See, it takes time. I think this is the other thing you learn working in the societal sector, that it's not that it'll catch like wildfire and everybody will adopt it. There are a lot of things that need to align. The policy, the officers, the government intent, everything needs to align before you make something like that happen. But short answer is there is no reason why, and some of our partners have taken this to rural areas also.
So when you're going into a rural area or even an urban area for that matter, right? So again, you're deploying via your ecosystem partners.
Yes.
So if you're deploying via the ecosystem partners, so I'm guessing this is still part of the tendering system that exists in governments right now. That's been there forever, right? So does basically using Digit or the e-governance platform, is that part of the tender that is submitted, or is that something that you are looking at ecosystem partners to use as a competitive advantage from a price perspective? I mean, like,
Both.
okay.
So sometimes we'll go to a government, and so we play that role of a catalyst in that sense. Sometimes we'll go to the government and say, "What are you doing about governance?" And they'll say, "This is what I'm trying to do." And we'll say, if you like, Odisha is a good example that where we initiated the conversation. We said, "Look at Digit, and we did a evaluation process. We do a very consultative evaluation process. So it's not that we want to sell something." And once they were kind of over the line, they issued an RFP which had Digit as a default from a technology point. But Calcutta Municipal Corporation, one of our partners, took the solution themselves because they felt it's going to give them. So both models work in that sense.
It's not like, I mean, like, in the private sector, it's not like SAP where you have to implement it throughout the entire company. So similarly, you don't have to implement Digit throughout the entire company. There is through the entire government. There's a mix and match capability.
But now what has happened is August this year, we signed a MOU with the Ministry of Urban Affairs in Delhi, where they have launched a mission called National Urban Digital Mission. And Digit was selected as a platform for a national hosted service they will provide to all the states.
That will lead to additional implementation.
So yeah, and that's also they'll also give incentives in various schemes to states to adopt it, or states have states can say, there are standards that go with that. I can comply to your standards or specs, and I'll not use the platform. That's also okay, right? But I think trying to ensure that the right specs and standards are used, whether by using the platform which is hosted by the central government, or creating instance of that for their own state, or making sure their existing systems comply to those specs and standards.
In all of this, my question was actually going to be around, how obviously so much of this is already implemented. There are more things you guys are solving. How does, let's say, to my earlier point, how does a private company or startup or someone who has, who wants to build on top of these layers, participate? Do they collaborate? Do you also work with other teams who help you, let's say, improve your OS, or is it all in-house? Do you hire your own tech talent? That means you're also competing with, let's say, the heavy tech industry of the country where everyone's hiring the best tech talent. How do you do it today?
I think our approach increasingly is that we need to get more people building on this, because I think we are not we look at ourselves as a catalyst, not as a we're not interested in going to 500 people. We're quite happy being 80, 90 people where we are, I think, but we obviously want to see more impact. And that can only happen when there are more and more things happen without us. So already the market so we're very happy we're not needed in all the market conversations. Right. We're very happy that national government has taken up the mission to take it to all the 30 odd states. That's amazing, right? And basically we are only interested in that the last person in a small town gets the service that they need at the right time with the right quality, right? So we're very happy, that government is spending money on the mission that we had started, so many years ago.
Right.
Similarly, on dev, I think it's taken us some time, but I think, and you should speak to our CTO, Manish. He's a crazy guy, right? So I think, and we're saying we have to be open. Right? There's no secret here. Right? So right now, all our specs are published through Gitbook on an open this thing. But I think we need to get better at getting people in, understanding what we do and how they can, because people want to contribute. That's what we're seeing, right? So we run co-creation workshops, we do webinars, but we need to do much more. But our philosophy clearly is that we got to really only bring in scarce resources, right? Resources which are already there. So yeah, I think that's where we're going.
Interesting. And as a, I don't know, shout out for folks who are in obviously not just the tech space, but interested in improving genuinely the various services. Where would you point them to? What would you recommend they start with? Should they try out? Obviously, they can try out building so many things on top of the platforms that you've enabled. But you want to do a recommendation on where to reach out, what to try, and how to get in touch with you.
Yeah. I think we have a page on our website. Kind of engage with us, and you can just write to us. or if people are interested, they can write to me. I think it's important that we need to kind of get people who are interested to work here. I mean, because I think there's so much more you can do, and unless we distribute the ability to solve, we can never solve everything, right? I mean, we still feel, we're only 10% fulfilling the promise of what we built in that sense, right? So I think right now they can write to me or they can write to Manish. I can share his email ID to you, but I'm happy for people to write to me also.
Oh, awesome. Great. So I think I'd just also like to remind everybody really quickly that please do rate us and review us wherever you're listening to this, Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever it is. It does help us spread the word. And if you enjoyed this conversation that we had with Viraj, then please do let somebody know. That also does help a lot. Let them know about this conversation and let them know about the good work that's being done by the folks at Digit and eGov.
Exactly. And, Viraj, I know we, as maybe technologists, a lot of us are introduced to what you guys are doing today. But like you said, we've probably experienced, hopefully many of us listening today have experienced some of the, things that you and your foundation have enabled. And it'll only get better from here. I think there's also a sense of people starting to believe this concept of trust that you said, that once they see trust in certain aspects of government, will demand it everywhere else. And that will lead to a lot more innovation, I'm sure, which you guys will play a instrumental part of. So thank you for doing what you do. And hopefully you'll inspire a lot more people to take part in this eGov
Absolutely.
process.
Thank you so much. Great conversation. And, as I said, you can point people to me if they want to talk more.
Can you just say your email address actually on the air so that people know what it is?
Yeah. It's viraj.tyagi@egov.org.in.
Perfect. And that's also the website, I think, where you can check out everything that eGov does. Thank you, Viraj. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Shunya One is brought to you by Intel. Performance made flexible. That's how wonderful gets done. Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus is joined by 90s icon and musician Remo Fernandez. They discuss his autobiography, his life, and a whole lot more. On Storytellers and Storysellers, Vineet is joined by stand-up comedian, podcaster, and now musician Akash Mehta about his journey in stand-up comedy and his upcoming debut album, What a Life. On the Talle Harate Kannada podcast, Pawan speaks to PL Uday Kumar. He's a technologist and history researcher, and they discuss digital 3D scanning technology being used to conserve Bengaluru's rich heritage of inscription stories. On Speakeasy, Dheeraj is joined by one of India's most sought-after influencers, Raj Shamani. And on the All Things Policy podcast, the Takshashila folks discuss the gender inequalities that exist in the fashion world. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And also do check out our YouTube channels. We have a number of them. You can get them on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And remember, if you're enjoying this show, or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. It really does help us spread the word. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors for the network this week, Cred, Bank of Baroda, CoinSwitch, Kuber, Intel, and Oxfam India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
पेश खिदमत है आपकी शान में हमारे अंजुमन से. Hi, I am Sadaf.
And I'm Arshid. खाने का इतिहास, economics, policy, psychology, सब है मेन्यू पे.
Only on the Nankali podcast every Wednesday, सिर्फ IVM podcast ऐप या वेबसाइट पर या फिर जहां से भी आप अपने पॉडकास्ट सुनते हो.